Well, we're in the home stretch. We're almost done talking about the syllabus for CIE 400, Comparative and International Education. My name is Alex Wiseman. I'm the professor for the class. And we have been talking about, everything, the goals and objectives, the policies, and the issues related to academic integrity and student accommodations. We've talked about the assignments in some detail, which obviously I will welcome any questions you have about that, both before class or in class or outside of class, whenever you might have questions. And we are now on the textbooks and reading resources section, leading into the class topics and reading assignment sections here on page 6 of the syllabus. You will see that there are two required texts. One of them is by Maria Manzan called Comparative Education, the Construction of a Field. It is a 2011 book. It is a book that we will read, I think, just about every chapter. I'm I'm embarrassed to say I'm forgetting if we skip a couple in there, but we're reading most of the book, so you definitely want to get yourself a copy of the book. It is worthwhile to have a copy. It is also a resource that you can use as you move through both our program at Lehigh and the field in general. I think that you will find it very worthwhile. I will be upfront with you in saying that I do not agree with everything that Maria Manzan says, and that's okay, because I think that what she puts in her book represents at least half, if not more than half of the people in comparative and international education and how they think about comparative education. I think about it in many overlapping ways, but just to show you that it is okay to have differing perspectives as long as we can agree on some common and core topics or themes or issues related to comparative education. We're using this book. It would be boring if we only used things that aligned with my version of comparative international education. And I think that you'll find that she does a nice job, a really strong job of outlining some of the history of the field, some of the debates around defining comparative and international education. She does a good job of synthesizing some of the larger theoretical discussions, specifically some of the theoretical discussions that I don't normally have in my own work. So you'll like it. The other book we're using is one by Cooper called Research, Synthesis, and Meta-Analysis, a Step-by-Step Approach. This is a methodology book, and it is not a comparative and international education specific book. It is looking at meta-analysis, broadly speaking, and how to conduct a research synthesis as part of that. And you will find as we move through the class that meta-analysis is actually a particular statistical procedure that can be used with empirical research literature after it is reviewed, potentially reviewed in the way that you're doing for your own research synthesis assignment. We will not actually be conducting the statistical analysis part of the meta-analysis. But we will be learning about what it is, and we will be doing a research synthesis that would allow us to conduct a meta-analysis on at least the documents that are reviewed that would be appropriate to use in a meta-analysis. So you'll see that we're using this as a way to talk about a methodology, even though the book itself is not geared towards comparative and international education specifically. So those are our two required texts. We also have many additional required readings that are available on the internet using Google Scholar or via the Lehigh Library online databases. Most of the readings will be available on the Lehigh Library online databases either through JSTOR or the ERIC databases specifically. And they should be accessible from anywhere in the world as long as you log in using your Lehigh identification number and your PIN or your password. So let me just say right now, any of the readings that are not in your required text that are either online or in the databases, all of those should be free. You should never have to pay for any of those as a Lehigh student. You may be required to log in using your Lehigh ID, or you may have to request the readings ahead of time from interlibrary loan or some other way that the library offers free access to that document. But I would never pay for anything other than the required text. I'd also like to point out, and I've highlighted it and underlined it and everything else so that you can see that I'm serious about it, it is your responsibility to find and download copies of the readings in advance of class so that you can do the reading and be prepared for class discussion. Do not wait to find the readings until the day before class. Get them as soon as possible for the whole semester. If I was you and I was listening to this right now, the first thing I would do after ending these screencasts would be to look through the syllabus, make sure that I had either downloaded or requested from the Lehigh Library electronic copies of as many of the readings as possible. Do that now. Okay. So, sorry that zoomed past. Let's look at the class topics and reading assignments. And I'm not going to go through each of these in painstaking detail, but I will go through the first few and then we'll sort of skim after that. You will see that in each of the parts of the class I have a little description and some key questions that I'm hoping that we can ask and answer as part of our discussions. You'll see that it is each of those descriptions and questions hopefully align with each of the topics for the weeks within that section. We will start on August 28th. That will be our first day of class. I would like for you to read the following required texts before coming to class on the first day, or before watching the screencast if you're in Sri Lanka and can't be on with us live. Right? Read these before you participate in class, whether that's live or through the recorded session. I would like for you to bring a list to class or post online in our discussion section if you're at a distance, a list of all the terms or phrases in the required readings from this first day that are unfamiliar to you. And be prepared to share that list with your classmates and provide some explanation for what you think those terms and phrases mean. Part of introducing comparative and international education is learning what the jargon is, learning how we talk about comparative and international education as a phenomenon, as a theory, as a methodology, as an empirical research agenda, right? And there's a language that we use. And so being familiar with that language is going to be important. We already talked in a previous screencast about your What is CIE assignment, and you're being asked to define what is education, what is international, what is comparative, right? These are all unique terms to our field. We use them in a way that is unique. I want you to be familiar with that as well, and you'll see that in the required readings for this first class, there are going to be a lot of terms that are going to pop up. Some will be defined in the readings themselves, some will be outside of that scope. It is your job to read these texts before class, bring a list of the terms or phrases that are unfamiliar to you, and be ready to discuss them with your classmates. So you're required to read Erwin Epstein's Why Pursue a Degree in Comparative and International Education. That is actually on the last page of this syllabus. So if you were to scroll down to the last page of the syllabus, you'd see that right there. Erwin gives a couple of answers to this question. I think there are more answers than that. I'd like for you to think of what some of the other answers are as well and bring those to class. We will also be reading some of Erwin Epstein's definitions of comparative and international education and seeing where he falls versus where we fall. Now, one of the reasons why we listen to Erwin Epstein on this is because Erwin Epstein is one of those giants in the field. He has been a part of the comparative and international education professional community in the United States and internationally for most of the field's sort of professional life, for most of those past 60 years. He's been very influential in how we define and think about our field. He has served as a president of the Comparative and International Education Society, as an editor of the Comparative Education Review. He is still very active in the field and in our conferences and in the literature. So we listen to Erwin. Again, just like anything, doesn't mean we have to agree with everything that Erwin Epstein says, but we need to be aware of what he says because that's important to know. And then you'll see that there's a piece that I'm asking you to read that I wrote actually with a former student in the CIE program here at Lehigh, Emily Anderson. We are now co-editors of the annual review of Comparative and International Education. I'm specifically asking you to read our introductory chapter from the 2013 volume of the annual review. It's called Reflections on the Field of Comparative and International Education and the Benefits of an Annual Review. To help you along in getting a hold of these, and you'll also see that there's another one down here about the professionalization of CIE. It's recommended, not required, but if you can read it, I think it would help. If you are having a hard time finding these readings, and since it's the first day of class, you will see that on our website in the syllabus and reading section you will find links. So there's Erwin Epstein's Comparative and International Education. You already know that his Why Pursue a Degree thing is at the end of the syllabus. Here's the Wiseman and Anderson reading. You can find the Wiseman and Matherly recommended reading by doing a Google search. I think it's available for free download online fairly easily. All right. And then you'll see that as we move through, the next week we'll have a historical background and definitions of the field. These two readings are also posted in the syllabus and readings. Well, one is posted in the syllabus and reading site. If you are a Lehigh student, click on here and just log in as a Lehigh student and search for this in JSTOR. You'll find a free copy that you can download there. And then you'll start seeing this discussion leaders line pop up. Remember that one of the assignments that you will be completing for the class in the semester is to lead discussion during one of our weeks. So we'll be starting on week 3, that's September 11th. We'll be reading some about the comparative method. We'll be getting some background on globalization, and we'll be talking a little bit about Cooper's research synthesis approach. Now, if you're a discussion leader, I'm not expecting you to cover all 3 of these because these, quite frankly, are all very distinct. What you might choose to do as a discussion leader is to select just one of the readings. Maybe you only want to talk about Reagan's comparative method reading, or maybe you only want to talk about Meyer's globalization theory and trends reading. Or maybe you only want to talk about, well, let's talk about Reagan and Meyer. Right? And you might just want to do one and not both. That's fine. Focus on one and not both. I'm happy if you do that. Just keep in mind that you should be discussing this with me ahead of time. Just make sure that we're all on the same page, and that way we can make sure that we're covering everything we need to cover in class. Remember that as a discussion leader, you are not presenting the readings. You are leading the class in an activity. And one way to do that would be to write the blog post that you're going to do about this reading ahead of time, ahead of the class, have it posted on our course website so the rest of your class can read it and be ready, and maybe that prepares them to come with some questions or come with some information or engage in an activity that you've developed ahead of time. Okay, as we move through, you'll see that when something's due, I have it bolded and in red. What is CIE? The essay is due on September 18th. You'll see that the same format goes for each of the weeks. There's a required reading, there's a recommended reading, and there's a discussion leader. This goes all the way through the class until we get to the end. And at the end, you'll see that there are spots for presentations. So you might think about when you want to be doing your presentation, and we can go ahead and jot that down now. The presentations will occur in 30-minute time slots with probably only 25 minutes really allotted for you to present and receive feedback, 5 minutes for transition for the next person. And we'll do that the last 3 weeks of class. All right? Finally, remember one of the recommended, not required ways to prepare for class is by doing this weekly reading memo. It's simply a one-page typewritten memo on each of the primary source readings for that week. I'm not requiring this, but this is here in case you need help thinking about how to work through the readings. There's some information in the back here about background and reference publications, different journals that you can be looking at, different online journals as well, or helpful encyclopedias. And then finally, Erwin Epstein's Why Pursue a Degree in Comparative and International Education. That's the syllabus. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class. If you have any questions, let me know.